Welcome to the Jacob Wayne Show. I am your Jacob Wayne, and with me is nobody. It is just me, your Jacob Wayne. I will say one thing off the bat here. One thing I like about doing these solo episodes is I don't have to wear these the whole time. And also, yeah, there's no, I can do my little pauses. There's no like little response thing I gotta respond to. Blah, 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 blah. I can just make weird noises. Nobody can stop me. But also, I think it is the headset thing. I really like the headset thing. I can just like breathe easy, do whatever. So anyway, I'll quit ranting about that and get into some other rants. What am I drinking? Well, I'm recording it at 1:38 in the afternoon on Tuesday, the day before we release this. So obviously this is a little later than we normally do it. So I'm just sipping some water and some coffee. And then I got to go work on a painting because I'm pretty far behind on some commission work that I needed to do. So this episode is probably going to be really brisk and nice and a good way to start the Monday of months, January. Tomorrow's the 5th. The day after that is January 6th. So rest in peace to all those that defended our democracy, and fuck you to those that rub shit on the walls, as I always like to say. Fuck you. But let's get to it. Any interesting food elements? I'll tell you one thing. I made a really good teriyaki slow cooker, like beef teriyaki slow cooker meal. New Year's Eve, it was just me hanging out at home. Roommate was back in Wyoming or something. And excuse me. Yeah, nothing too special about that beyond it just being a really delicious teriyaki meal that I may have cooked a bit too long because I tossed a few back and fell asleep sitting up on the couch. But slow cooker for a reason. I knew I could let it sit. And yeah, it was really tasty. Had that for a few meals. And then I remembered that I'm 35 and have this diverticulitis issue, and that much red meat 3 nights in a row is not something I can really do as much anymore. At least like really saucy red meat like that, I've noticed it kind of starts to bug me. But enough depressing stuff. Let's get into some other kind of weird depressing stuff. We just finished The Sopranos at our house yesterday. If you have never seen The Sopranos, I highly recommend it. It's easily one of my favorite shows of all time, maybe my favorite. I love the show even more. This was my 3rd time going through it, and it was just hilarious and surreal and philosophical, and also just a shot of the mundane of life, which was also somewhat of the philosophy of the whole thing. For those that have watched my review of the prequel movie they made, The Many Saints of Newark, I couldn't stand that movie, and I still stand by me not being standing it, because the show is just so much more clever and funny, and the mundane. Like the movie itself kept trying to build itself up to be more dramatic and cinematic than The Sopranos ever really was. Like that was the thing, is that this really heavy, violent, or crazy thing might happen in Sopranos, but then it would be followed up by somebody just like eating at the counter in the kitchen, and they're like, "Oh, gonna invade Iraq. Why don't you go shuck a guy's cock?" Like whatever it is. My Tony Soprano, I think, was pretty good at the beginning of watching the season, and it's just gotten way worse. But that ending, he definitely got shot. That whole, I think it's finally admitted now by David Chase. Spoiler alert, by the way. The whole last season is like ruminating on different philosophies and what might happen when you die. It's hinted at. Sometimes they beat you over the head with it, but it's got a lot of like mysticism and what ifs, and maybe it's the wind, maybe it's God, maybe it's mescaline, maybe it's the universe, like a spaceman. And it all ends with him looking up, and there's a shot, I think, in the penultimate episode. That's always the one before the end, I think, where he's talking to his brother-in-law Bobby, and he's like, do you think you even hear it when you get shot? And or something like along those lines. And they hinted that throughout the show, and then yeah, he looks up and then nothing. Playing Journey's Don't Stop Believing, just like don't stop. Cuts to black. Pissed off people at the time. I didn't watch the show until a few years after the show ended, but I remember the controversy, and I don't really mind spoilers, so I looked up what it was, and I was like, that's kind of interesting ending. And I kind of shrugged it off like almost as a gimmicky thing to do, and maybe there's a hint of gimmick to it, but I think they were building to it so specifically, and it was just like the last two episodes, maybe even more, are a masterclass in like tension building. Like you're just waiting for the other shoe to drop, which I can relate to that in life. In essence, where things are kind of mundane and going well, I have a habit of being like, oh man, when is something bad going to happen? That might have been because I was arrested kind of in odd ways as a youth, in ways that I wasn't expecting. It wasn't like I was out spray painting walls and then getting caught. It was like, oh, somebody snitched me out, and oh, holy shit, I'm going to DT for a few months. And I turned it around, stopped doing things like that, but that definitely had an effect on my mind. Like just always thinking like, oh well, things are good now, but eventually somebody's gonna decide they don't like me, call the cops on me, ruin my life for a few months. Yeah, that'll be nice. But yeah, that's also the interesting thing. On that tangent, 20 years ago today, I would have been in Tonto National Forest, Arizona, doing a wilderness program because of the trouble I got into when I was a kid. For that particular thing, it was for shoplifting. I used to shoplift. Pretty good at it too, which it is a bit of an addicting thing. Once you get good at that, you're like, oh, well, I can just have things for free. I'm going to do this all the time. And then you get caught and your balls curl up inside you, and a coppery blood taste spills over your tongue. I think that's your adrenaline. And all your hair stands up on your body, and you know what you did was wrong and you got caught. And I think it took all like living that and getting caught to finally make me be like, oh, I think I need to live an honest life and work for what I got. So that did change me for a positive, getting caught and in trouble and all that shit. And I think there's a line from one of my favorite MCs, Earl Sweatshirt. He has a line in one of his songs. He goes like, "I used to be a liar, so now I'm honest as fuck." And I always identified with that line. I was like, "Yep, I used to lie and be pretty good at it," and you could see the negative effects it had. So I'm like, "Nah, I'm just gonna be honest, even if it's like, yeah, I'm only packing 6 inches if it's a really warm day and I'm excited for something." And people are like, "Oh." And yeah, I get maybe you didn't want to hear that, but tough luck. I'm honest. I want to see you be honest. Whip it out. What do you got? Of course, there's a time and a place. Uh, but the wilderness thing, there was the New Year's Eve. This would have been 2002. We were up on some plateau thing looking for water all day. It eventually hit a point where we had gone long enough without water that we had to send the adult counselors off to go find some while we, the kids, sat in some shade and just rested. They finally found some. They took our canteens, and what you would do, you'd get like chlorine something drops. It's been a minute. And you do about 4 drops in whatever water you could find, and you let it sit for about um 45 minutes, I think is what was recommended. And that would like kill all the bacteria. You definitely wanted to look out for giardia was the main thing. And so they found a little big puddle of water that was like basically cow shit water. The cows would drink it, shit in it. And so they brought back this cow shit water. We didn't care because we really hadn't had water in a while. Drank that, sat for a minute, then got back up, started hiking again, went down the plateau, which meant we were going to be hitting the creek or like these little offshoots of the Verde River. And we had to cross through water when we would come across it like that sometimes. And so we walked through that a bunch of times and got soaking wet. And it was, once nighttime happens down there, it gets fucking cold. So then we started worrying about hypothermia, and all our primitive fire starting equipment was soaked. And they did their counselor things like, well, you got to start a fire. This is wilderness. And so we're there doing a little stick rub thing, just freezing. And I feel like I'm fucking this up, but I do remember the different stages of hypothermia. You're like start shaking really bad, and then you just stop shaking, and that's where your body's like kind of starts to get tired. And that's when you're like, uh-oh, you stop shaking, the body's kind of giving up and go to sleep. It's not a good thing. So they noticed that we were doing that, and one of the adults like, we're fine, pulls out some matches and starts a fucking fire. And we're like, hey, son of a bitch. But we were thankful to have a fire. And then it's like, I feel like minutes after we got a fire like actually going, went right back into shivering from the weird numb fall asleep and die thing. So yeah, that was one of my most memorable New Year's Eves 20 years ago. And I didn't like that program very much, so I won't say their name because there are individuals I really liked. And I do think it's better than a lot of wilderness programs that operated in the West. And we'll leave it at that, I guess. Oh, speaking of which, there's like Vito Jr. and the Sopranos, and they got all these wilderness programs in like Idaho and Utah. They don't even, they're so barbaric or like whatever it is. And I was like, mine wasn't as bad. Like in the Sopranos, they send these like 3 dudes to come like pull him out of his bed, like, let's go. He basically gets like kidnapped. It wasn't that rough for me, thankfully. I just got woken up, taken to court. This is for your shoplifting thing. I was like, why didn't you tell me this was my court date? It's like, well, we were worried if you were gonna run away. Oh, all right. So I had like been waking up that day, getting ready to go to school. And they're like, actually, you don't have school. You have court. Oh, shit. Go to court, get sentenced with this wilderness thing. I have to go wait in DT for a few days. I can't even remember exactly why, but that was fun. And then got picked up and driven down by my parents to Arizona, did the whole thing. And yeah. So another interesting element of that is 9/11. It happened that September, September 2001. And that was a big deal, obviously. But what was interesting about going to Wilderness, and I think it started either at the end of October, probably more likely somewhere in November, because I still was there for a little bit after New Year's Eve. So yeah, shit, maybe even December actually. But I do remember it was really odd to be like totally removed from society right after 9/11 happened. And that part wasn't so odd. It was getting re-injected into society just a couple months later and see how much society had changed. Like so much more Islamophobia, racism towards Middle Eastern people in general. Let's go to war with Iraq. We got all these weird safety protocols in the airports now. I was like, wow, like America's freaking out right now a little bit. It kind of, I'm a little thankful for that. It helped me step away and step back in and be like, yeah, 9/11 was a tragedy, but maybe some of this is an overreaction. And clearly, as far as the wars and Patriot Act go, they were. Maybe you did need some of that airport security. I don't know if we mind it that much now anymore. We've pretty much gotten used to it. But yeah, I remember it came back to high school after that because, yeah, that's what you do. And I think I was pretty excited to just get back into school and socialize a little bit, which is odd because that was like probably the most social I ever felt. And came back, had a pretty good tan, was in pretty good shape for just a little bit. I would just wear what I wore in Wilderness, which was like the thermal tight shirt thing and like khaki pants with a bunch of pockets. And I was like, hey, had a beard. People are like, what the fuck is that guy? And I enjoyed that. I mean, I would also wear System of a Down like eyeliner in high school to fuck with the hicks, as we would say. I like to fuck with people. So let's move on. Movies. Should we play the movie drop? Let's play the movie drop. If we got it. Yeah. Yeah, we're gonna play that movie drop. Alrighty, that gave me a nice moment to sip water and quit sipping while I'm chatting. What do we have to go over on movies real quick? Oh man, I don't know if I'm totally ready to break this one down yet, but I'm going to because I need to move on from it in my head. The only real movie I've watched since the last episode was part of Don't Look Up. I will finish it, but I had to turn it off because I thought I really didn't like it. And there's probably a fair amount of you. They're like, what? I thought it was one of the best movies of the year and whatever. And, that's the thing about movies and art. It's all subjective. You can like what you want. And you might be like, oh, did you not agree with the message? And I'm like, I think I even didn't mind the message. It was how it was delivered. It's directed by Adam McKay, who also did the movie Vice about Dick Cheney and The Big Short about the 2008 financial crisis. And both of those movies were way too satirical when it needed to be serious, and way too serious when it had already decided it was a comedy or like a weird farcical satire. And so the tone is just all over the place. I can't stand the I'm going to talk to the audience and tell them everything about this like I know everything about this. And did you not know that, dumbass? Like, it's so smug. His directing, his writing, the way he presents his ideas is just so smug. And I can't stand it. I feel like, to me, it's like hurting the message rather than helping it get delivered. People that aren't inclined to agree with his liberal politics, I guess is the way to put it, I think are going to watch this and be even more like, ugh, this is Hollywood telling me that I'm like stupid for not knowing about this stuff, even though I do know about this stuff. And so this was just this is an improvement upon those other two movies, in my opinion. But it was just too unrealistic for me. And I know it's satire, it's humor, comedy, but it just, for what it's trying to say and its moments of seriousness, it was like, no, this is not pure satire. This is you being smarmy again. And let me see if I can read this review, because I think it really summed up my feelings. It's a review that's on Letterboxd. That's letterboxd.com. So boxed like BOXD, letterboxd.com. I put up my movie diary there, and a bunch of other people do, and people write reviews, and it's like one of my favorite film sites. Let's see if it was this one. He gave this 2.5 stars. I think I gave it 2. He said, embarrassingly out of touch and on the nose. This is reviewed by San, by the way, SAN. Embarrassingly out of touch and on the nose. I haven't witnessed a script edited with imagery this cringe and unsubtle in such a long time. For satire, that's the worst achievement. Admittedly, however, I still admire the ambition behind this, and some parts were kind of funny, even though I was rolling my eyes throughout the majority of this runtime. Yeah, the eye rolling is just like, oh my god, like, is that the news media? That's all it is, right? It's just ridiculous. Uh, this one person, Josh Lewis, gave it 1 star. Let's see what he has to say. As smug and unfunny and politically useless as you've heard, but worst of all, just a total bore. How do you make an apocalypse movie satire openly courting comparisons to things like Doctor Strangelove, Melancholia, Southland Tales, etc., and just do as little as humanly possible with the style? Even Armageddon has more skill and energy to it, and at the very least is not deeply embarrassed to be an absurd, star-studded Hollywood picture. Ooh. Now there's something. I did see a really funny comparison meme, like comparing Armageddon to Don't Look Up. Don't Look Up is like Hollywood liberal version of Armageddon. Armageddon being like pretty right-wing, rah-rah America stuff. Like, and they made all comparisons, like how at the beginning Bruce Willis is like hitting a golf ball at a Greenpeace boat off of his oil rig. I don't know. There's a bunch of other ones, and I already feel exhausted by this review. But I couldn't help but agree with those guys. Do the actors show up and do their jobs pretty well? Yeah. Leo's Leo. Jennifer Lawrence. Ugh. Meryl Streep, though, they got a good Meryl Streep body double to play Meryl Streep as the president. That was nice. I've never seen her like ghost walk through a movie like that before. I haven't seen all their stuff though either. But wow. I will finish it though. I can't help but think that my dislike of Adam McKay as a director and the way he likes to present his politics and ideas gets in the way of maybe I would enjoy this a little bit more just for what it is. But yeah, definitely not best picture like some people are trying to say. And whatever. Yeah, don't look up. I say don't watch this piece of trash. All right. Let's move on. Man, I'm just on a negative dark train today. Huh? Well, we're going to keep riding it. This is positive, though. We're talking about music now. Sorry, moving on from movies. We don't have a music drop. Oh, yeah, we do. Hold on a second. It's me ripping off the gorillas with my melodica. That means we're talking about music now. In music news, the naked Nirvana baby from the Nirvana Nevermind photo, or oh, Jesus Christ, I'm still waking up. I feel like the naked Nirvana baby from the Nevermind album cover in the photo. You might have heard he filed a pornography lawsuit against the band because it was child pornography to have him as a baby on the album cover. This guy, his name's Spencer Eldon, and he's running all kinds of other weird rackets to try to like make money off of who he is, which is really nobody. This just happens to be a baby we've all seen. But his lawsuit was dismissed, so yay. He should be dismissed, and let's never speak of Spencer Eldon again. And as far as music goes, was there any new music releases? Started listening to Nina Simone. I'm kind of wrapping my head around her. Listening to the album Pastel Blues. And I listened to it as a recommendation through an interview with Maynard James Keenan. He was talking about how emotionally honest and raw she is in the way she sings and creates music. So I was intrigued by that. So that's what I've been listening to. As far as new releases, there was a new cover track released by Crosses. I can't remember if we talked about it, but it's their cover of Goodbye Horses, which a little bit of interesting, like, crate diving history kind of stuff. I was like, well, oh, that song's by Q Lazarus. And I knew that because I liked the original Goodbye Horses song because it's the song that plays during that creepy tuck it back scene in Silence of the Lambs when he's all like, Goodbye Horses. And you're just like, oh my God, that's creepy, but the song's really catchy. And so when Crosses released this cover, I was like, sweet, cool cover. I'm loving this 80s stuff that they do. They apparently have new music coming this year, so that's great. But I was like, let's listen to some Q Lazarus. I've never heard anything other than Goodbye Horses, and I couldn't find anything. Now, I could have looked harder. Maybe there is other stuff, but this is just like a Spotify Wikipedia search. And apparently not a lot of people know where Q Lazarus is, or just that Q Lazarus was a bus driver and then had worked with some of these music producers and put out Goodbye Horses for film, I think, and then just quit making music. Now, if you know the history of Q Lazarus, or you are Q Lazarus and you're listening right now, write us at the Jacob Wayne Show at gmail.com and we'll get to the bottom of this. But I was a little bummed. Just like trying to find that Mariah Carey alternative grunge album she made. It's like, why don't we have that? We need more stuff from you. So Q Lazarus. I kind of hope Q Lazarus is still around and then shocks us with another Tuck It Back anthem. But anything else? Doesn't seem to be. Just a lot of stuff I was already listening to and have probably already mentioned. So this is what I mean. We're in the Monday of months, January. It's my least favorite month. I'm learning to appreciate it more and more as I get older. But man, stuff just really slows down. So whatever. Okay. How long have we been recording? I'm not sure. I was going to talk a little bit in the food section earlier, and I don't know. I was going to say that I recently purchased some accent seasoning, savory seasoning, and you might, oh, I've used that. I've heard of that. And for those that don't know, that's basically monosodium glutamate. And if you're like, monosodium glutamate, what is that? You might have also heard of it as MSG. Now, I spent some time living in China, and I feel like it had to have been used over there. I know it's a Japanese invention, but so sorry if I'm getting that wrong, but in general, I never really cared when there was this whole like no MSG, like, oh my God, it's bad for you. Like, I was like, eh. It's like, and that was literally my whole reaction or education on it. I was like, oh, it's a thing that's in Chinese food, I think. And there's this whole movement to get rid of MSG because it's not healthy. So this is MSG or it's no MSG. I don't give a shit. Put it in my face. So I remember reading some story about how Japanese soldiers would have MSG to like improve their food rations. And when Americans discovered it, they were like, holy shit, this is delicious. And I think in general, that might have been America's first real like encounter with MSG. But I was going to go over this article real quick for those that didn't know. This is like a little bit of informative section of the podcast. So I did a quick dive over this article. So I'm tried to find the key points that I thought were relevant or interesting. So the foundations of MSG. This is from a Men's Health article, by the way, titled MSG. Sorry. We can't talk about MSG without talking about racism. So, yeah, for those that are afraid of such subjects, I suggest getting over it because it's fine. We're going to be okay. And if you're listening to this podcast and that makes you nervous and cringy, I don't think you should be listening to this podcast anyways. But it's true. Essentially, the entire reaction to MSG, and we're going to have a no MSG Asian restaurant ran by Americans, specifically white people, is pretty racist. And it was all part of somewhat of a propaganda process. But we're going to get into that. I'm going to try to not get too convoluted like I usually do. But first things first, the rise of the essence of deliciousness. For the better part of the past century, MSG was actually considered an indispensable ingredient worthy of celebration. The compound was discovered in 1908 with Kikune Ikeda, a Japanese chemist. He isolated the chemical responsible for making sea kelp stock so tasty. Ikeda proposed calling this new unique flavor umami. First things first, umami, I'd heard of it. I never clicked and knew that, holy shit, that's what that is. But yeah, umami is now associated with our sense of savoriness in food. On a scientific level, monosodium glutamate is the sodium salt of glutamic acid, and glutamic acid becomes glutamate when it's broken down by the body. As soon as MSG hits the saliva in your mouth, it breaks down into glutamate and sodium, which your taste buds perceive as salty savory, umami, translated as essence of deliciousness from Japanese. So the essence of deliciousness. Now, we're going to skip ahead a little bit. And it was obviously became popular, used in a bunch of stuff. And you can look this article up and read the details. But what I found interesting is that it started with one bad complaint, basically. In 1968, a researcher and pediatrician named Robert Ho Man Kwok, MD, wrote to the New England Journal of Medicine detailing symptoms of numbness and palpitations that he experienced after the consumption of food from Chinese restaurants. The editor playfully dubbed the letter Chinese Restaurant Syndrome and subsequently received numerous letters both ridiculing and supporting Kwok's claims. The New York Times was quick to pick up the story, and a study published in the journal Science in early 1969, made a connection between the syndrome and MSG. As other scientists began to study the phenomenon, they didn't take into account how their results might be spun for potential harm, which is science. And I think we'll take a little break here from the MSG just to mention one more time. This is a podcast that loves science. And does science always get things right? No. Very often they get things wrong. And wrong in a way that actually harms society or harms people. So why would you trust it? Partially because I'm looking at this article on a computer screen, talking into a microphone, looking at a camera, and being able to distribute this podcast out to people. That all took science to be able to have all these things to communicate with you lovely people. So there are lovely perks to science. I mean, there's a science to ceramics and a science to making delicious coffee, but there's a lot of drawbacks. And so for me, why you can still trust science and should is that it's constantly reassessing and questioning itself and re-experimenting and retesting. And even if you follow the scientific process and did a study and it yielded certain information or certain results, that's not the end of it. It's not like, well, that's done, let's move on, that's just how it is. And to me, I'd be a lot more down with religion if they operated in that. It's like, look, I got a lot of faith and this is how it is and this is how that goes, but we're going to keep questioning it and we're going to keep wondering, like, I don't know, maybe we didn't understand God. Because when you come across things like how religion is about homosexuality or race or nationalism or whatever it may, or ghosts, the end of times, things like that, you're like, as you study them, you become more and more like, oh, maybe that's a man-made thing that happened right there. Yeah, that doesn't sound very godlike. That sounds more like somebody in charge wanted to like inject his own little thing and take power. So if you were a Christian or Muslim, Buddhist, whatever, and you want to believe that stuff and it truly makes sense to you with how the whole thing works and fits together, good for you. Don't shove your beliefs on everybody. And I guarantee you science does not shove their beliefs on anybody. They're just trying desperately to show you the information that they actually did a study for. If Christians could be trusted to like do studies where they try to go find angels and ghosts and give us data rather than goofy shows on, I was going to say PBS, but no, it wouldn't be on PBS. You know, ghost hunting shows. That's not science. That's entertainment and grifters. And I don't know. I think you as a listener understand what I'm trying to say. I don't think science, disproves things like God or ghosts or anything mythical. But what it would do if you actually did proper studies into any of that stuff is it would give it another name. It would give it like, oh, like this is always one we would talk about when we got like super stoned and stuff. It's like maybe ghosts are just like residual, almost like deja vu memories of like super heightened kinetic energy of like a certain area, like where eh, it's like if something really traumatic happened in a place, then it affected the molecules in that place. So if anybody steps into it, it's like has this residual memory because time is a circle or whatever. It all sounds very woo-woo what I'm saying, right? And I don't necessarily believe it. I don't believe in ghosts. But I have plenty of friends that like to think that they're sciencey that do. And good for them for believing that and thinking that, but go do studies then. Actual studies. Don't give me an anecdotal story about how you were in a creepy house once and you saw something. That's not a study. Anyway, to get back to it, science, science, science. It's your friend. We can all use it in our everyday life. And yeah, the big top science guy that's getting a lot of money from his one theory, he's not God, he's not the prophet, he's not the Pope. He can be questioned. And you got to remember that. And yeah, so anyway, we're going to get right back to this. Scientists doing something that isn't so great is that a year later, a study in Science magazine reported that mice injected with MSG showed stunted skeletal development, obesity, and in females, infertility. Extrapolating from the data, the author of the paper questioned whether MSG was safe for pregnant women. Except the scientists in the study delivered between 5 and 15 milligrams of MSG into the baby mice, a dose equivalent to 245,000 milligrams for a 180-pound human, far above the 500 milligrams Americans consume daily. So that was kind of funny to me. It's like, well, we're doing a study and we're gonna see if this MSG, it was gonna might fuck you up. So we're gonna take this little cute baby mouse. We're gonna take this baby mouse and we're gonna inject it with 245,000 milligrams of MSG. Monosodium Glutamate, I think is what they call it. We're gonna inject it right in there. It's you can see it coming out of its little cute eyeballs. And oh man, this MSG is fucking it up. We better stop eating this stuff. I mean, look at what we did to this cute little baby mouse. We replaced its blood with monosodium glutamate, and it's having a problem with it. I think, sometimes these studies, they don't think about the finer points. And so I feel like you get that a lot. Like when you're looking at, this little thing that's in your food. Now, this might not be the best example, but something that's in like fast food. Like, oh, see, it's toxic. It'll kill you. It's like, well, in what dosage? What amount? Because I don't know if you guys have ever read that book, Flowers in the Attic or something. It's about a crazy grandma that like keeps her kids up in the attic, and she just tortures them. She's like, hey, you were bad, so I'm gonna put a hose down your throat and just turn it on and fill you up with water. But you're like 70 to 80% water, like to begin with, right? Like, what's bad about that? No, it's gonna fucking kill you. Too much of anything can kill you. It's just a matter of how much, what dosage, this and that. I mean, I don't know. I would like to say it's common sense, but people read like, oh, all natural and we don't have this chemical, don't have this chemical, this chemical. It's January 1st. I'm going to do a detox and get all these chemicals out of my system. Is like, guess whose job that is? It's your liver and your kidneys. Hopefully you got 2 of them. See, I'm not a fucking doctor. Now I'm like questioning myself. I'm like, so it's not your kidneys, it's a blah, blah. But your liver. You're not going to suck toxins out of the bottom of your feet. There's been studies, nothing conclusive. January. So, MSG, started using it. It's delicious. I put that into my teriyaki dish. I put it on a steak. I put it on my salad last night. It was incredible. So let's all re-embrace MSG and let's just call it MSG. Let's not call it accent like, they're nervous. People be scared of it. Like, no, MSG rules. And yeah, America was racist when they were like, well, we're going to make a very clean, no MSG Chinese food restaurant where we serve sugary orange chicken and Kung Pao chicken. Yeah. Anyway, let's wrap up this podcast, shall we? This day in history, January 4th, Burma's granted independence. On this day in 1948, the Southeast Asian nation of Burma, now known as Myanmar, formally gained independence, completing the transfer of power negotiated by the Burmese leader Aung San and British Prime Minister Clement Attlee in 1947. So, happy independence to Myanmar. I know there's some crazy stuff going on there now. I think the military just took over from a democratic leader. Once again, something I'm not well informed on. So correct me if I'm wrong. Feel free to write us at the jacobwayneshow@gmail.com because I'd love to know more, but only have so much time in the day. Today in history, the Burj Khalifa, the world's tallest building, officially opened in Dubai in the United Arab Emirates. That was in 2010. In 2007, U.S. politician Nancy Pelosi was elected Speaker of the House of Representatives, becoming the first woman to hold office. So, I don't really like her very much, and it's kind of, I think she's fake. I'm not saying that as like, just liberal. Like, no, just I'm a pretty liberal guy. I still have always found Nancy Pelosi to be really disingenuous and yeah, just one of those fake politicians. Just does one thing on TV, does another in life. But kudos to being the first female to hold that position in office, and hopefully we have better and better representatives that are men and women and whatever in the future. In a State of the Union message, U.S. President Lyndon B. Johnson proclaimed his vision of a great society and called for an enormous program of social welfare legislation. That was in 1965. Lyndon B. Johnson, another dude, not the biggest fan of him, but passed some pretty good things. So kudos to actual social welfare legislation. How about that, you know? And this is a positive one. 2 positive ones to finish this up. 1809, French educator Louis Braille, who developed a system of printing and writing that is extensively used by the blind and that was named for him, was born near Paris. And also today, Isaac Newton was born, English physicist and mathematician. Born in January 4th, 1643 in Woolsthorpe, England, and he died March 31st, 1727, aged 84 in London, England. He lived a pretty long life. Didn't realize that. So, Isaac Newton, science, right? He did some everyday science stuff. He's a pretty impressive fella. Trust the science. eat MSG. I think we're going to call this episode Monosodium Glutamate. And Happy New Year 2022. Let's get it at it. Get at it, everybody. Get your sippies. Live well. Ta-ta! Thank you for listening to The Jacob Wayne Show. If you would like to contact us, please write us at fakoshka@gmail.com. That is FAKOSHKA@gmail.com. You can find us on Spotify, iTunes, and YouTube. Simply search The Jacob Wayne Show and it should pop right up. Make sure you like and subscribe and leave a review and share this podcast with your friends. Please write us. It helps add content to the show and makes the show even better for you, the listener. Thanks for tuning in.